once upon a time, there was a young woman who wanted her work to make a difference in the world. She'd heard all those concepts about find your purpose, follow your passion, and the money will come. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. So she took all of her resources and invested them into a social enterprise. It was glorious. My life, for of course this is my story, was full of creativity and community engagement and inspiring people. It was fabulous. We were working from dawn till midnight every night, using every bit of our intelligence and creativity to bring this vision to pass. But we launched just before the recession. And as one corporate sponsor said to us, honey, we aren't even buying our corporate football tickets this year. I knew then I was in trouble. So the business failed, but not only the business, my vision of what was important failed. And I lost all my savings because the recession pulled down the value of everything, and soon my house was gone. And I was there with 2 kids to support and no job, no one was hiring. But the hardest part for me was there was no vision anymore. So this heroine needed a complete reinvention. But even through these disastrous times, there were 2 things that I held on to. One was I was unwilling to ever go back to living asleep ever again. I'd been through this experience of living with every bit of my brain and creativity alive and happening and making things go in the world. And to go back to just sitting in a cubicle and selling black boxes to another country, that was not a possibility for me. The second thing that was really important was I realized how critical it was for me to reinvent my own story, to rewrite what I was saying to people. First, there was a practical reason. I'd go out and people would say, well, what are you doing now? And it really felt terrible to say, well, I failed. So I needed a new story. And I thought back to myself about a wonderful lunch that I had with Archbishop Tutu. And Archbishop Tutu told me the story when he was growing up, poverty-stricken in South Africa, in a situation where blacks were not allowed to own property, whites didn't even speak to them, no opportunities whatsoever. And one day he was walking along a dirt path and he picked up a magazine that had been discarded by the side of the road. It was Ebony magazine and the cover was Jackie Robinson. And I can still hear his voice in my head. He's such a wonderful man. He said to me, I did not know baseball from ping pong, but here was a man playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Here was a man as black as I. And what made me grow inches was the fact that this man could triumph over such odds. So he got this story in his head of a vision that he could go beyond what his community, what his family, what the system was in South Africa. And I thought about that, and I thought really there are 2 different ways that you have reinvention. One is, reaching beyond what your community is. And the second is the kind that I had, where the rug gets pulled out from under you and you have no idea what to do next. But either way, you really need to go back and get rid of the stuff from the past that doesn't serve your story anymore. How much do we hold on to that stuff that doesn't do us any good? On my dark days, during this period of reinvention, I would hear the voice of one of my relatives saying, if you get divorced, you're going to end up alone and broke, living in a dark apartment. Your children will be taken away, and no one will ever love you again. Crazily enough, this was well-meaning by someone who really loved me. She was telling me good advice from her perspective, which was the 1950s housewife perspective, that the way to succeed in life was simply to find a man and make him happy. But that story didn't work for me. So sorting through the pieces of my past, I had to let go of a bunch of that. And I also had to open my mind to new ideas. Where did I go? I started volunteering, working on committees. I started talking to people I'd never talked to before, astrologers, my minister, all kinds of people. And I had to find a way to filter what was useful to my story and what was not. And I went back to that first premise, which is what makes you come alive, what makes you excited. And no matter what the overall framework was, I just would step forward into what made me happy and what made me alive at every stage. Another great example of that is a friend of mine, Wendy Booker. Wendy Booker was a classic, I don't know, housewife, interior designer, junior league person doing jazzercise. And then when she turned 44, half of her body went numb. And she went to the doctor and she found out she had MS. A little like me, the rug was just pulled out completely from under her. And she had a good friend, her best friend was diagnosed with breast cancer the very same week. So the two of them decided that the way they were going to thumb their noses at their diseases was to run the Boston Marathon. Women who had never jogged before in their lives. So they stepped into it and they went jogging, and one thing led to another. And Wendy was asked to join an expedition, and she became the first woman with MS to summit Mount Denali. Amazing, right? She then, stepping into that again, she was like, wow, this is so wonderful, and this is changing her life, and this was so exciting. She started doing more and more, and she took on climbing the 7 summits, which is the highest summit on each continent. From there, she's 57, half of her body is still numb, she's got MS, and she just started training for the Iditarod. Pretty amazing, right? But that was all by, she didn't see that before she did the Boston Marathon. It was all just stepping forward into what made her feel alive. The next thing was she started working on a book, and this is how I got to know her story and how she worked, because I helped her write and publish this book. And in the old days, the other old story that we need to get rid of is the concept that you have to ask permission to do whatever it is you want to do. It used to be you had to find a publisher in order to get a book out. But she wrote a book, she goes out speaking all over the world, and we self-publish that. It used to be that if you had an idea or an invention, you had to go to a big corporation and sell it to them. But look at my fiance Ed, who's been inventing and getting things out all his life. Don't ask permission, just go out and do it. That's the next step. The next thing is, people ask me all the time, how do you get opportunities to do all these things? From running the Great American Beer Festival, exporting beef to Japan, doing all these different things. How do you do that? And the key to me is always asking, what can I bring of value? What can I bring of value to the picture? Because you've got your vision and your passion, and it needs to match with what you bring of value to the table. So one example of that is recently, about 2 months ago, I was sitting up having a cup of tea with some people from Colorado State, and they said, what this state needs is a maker fair. I'd never heard of a maker fair before, but they told me about what it was about, and I was like, I want to do that. So my first thought was, who am I going to go get to hire me to produce the maker fair? Within 5 minutes, I said, well, that's a dumb idea. 2 months later, I'd still probably be going before some planning commission saying, could you let me do this, please? Instead, I started a company, I got a team, I got City of Loveland to host. They're fantastic. We have about 5,000 people expected in early October. We've got volunteers from all over the state, and it's going to be a great event. So find where your vision and your values intersect, and just go out and do it. Rewrite your story to what makes you come alive. Thank you.